I only have 2 cameras. They're not to secure the guitars. Uh, they're to check on the dog, make sure he's sleeping or not getting into, I don't know, peeing on a 5150 combo or something, you know? And, you know, as far as the guitars, I brought them all and the amps, I carried them all in myself. So you want that trouble? Come get it. You know?
Yeah, tell me about it. Tell me about it. And it's funny that you mentioned that because everything's slowly moving to that where people don't want to lug anything. You go to see a band and there's no backline. The two of us grew up seeing walls of Marshalls. That was part of the criteria, right? You had a Les Paul or some kind of cool guitar, and then behind you, like we do right now, because we still have to like assimilate it with it somehow. We
Yes.
had the Marshall stack, and you had long hair. It was part of the jersey, you know, and things have changed so much.
Yeah. I mean, back then, the look and the image was all part of the rebellion. And then now that I look back on it, everyone had their uniform, whether you were in a punk band or a metal band or a yacht rock band, you know, and the thing for me with the amps is when I go to a gig and I don't see any amps, I don't feel like I'm going to be terrified by anything. And if I go in and I see somebody took the time to at least bring one stack, that gives me a lot of hope that what I'm about to see and hear is going to be blistering in one way or another. It doesn't have to be metal or, hard rock. It could be any band. Or if you have if you just have a real amp there, and I've got nothing against modelers and a lot of them sound good, but my theory is, and this would relate to like Bonamassa too. If you're already playing at this volume and then your clean sound is at that volume too, where do you go? Right now, if you've got this behind you, I can go whisper clean just with a volume knob, and then I can light it up. But when you're whatever interface, because I don't even know what they all do. Um, if your distorted sound is already just here, it's not going there, and so you lose a lot of the in the face dynamic.
So I
So
Yeah, and I understand why people have moved to modelers because you could rely on them, right? You're going to show up, it's going to do the same thing every night. You could rely that it's going to work. Unlike a Marshall or an old Fender, or it's just like it's good luck. Who knows what's going to happen? Um, and so I get that part of it, like the technical part of it. But then the other part of it, like, so from, let's say, just boil it down to like the club days, right? If you've played in clubs, right? And let's say even better, you're on an old wooden stage, right? And you have a 412 or maybe a full stack or whatever it is that you have, and your guitar, and everything's working fine, great. The stage is vibrating with the cabinets,
yes.
and that's especially at really loud volumes. There's nothing more spiritual than that. And I feel like the guys that are just running these units into the front of house are missing all of that. Like the controlled feedback. Like, it's one of the things that you see here in the store. Like, not everyone is good with their volume knob and being able to, because they're not used to playing at loud volumes, and like how to control a Marshall or how to control a guitar from getting all squealy. And that takes practice of playing really freaking loud for a long time, and you lose that with the modelers, I think, and that's part of, to me, that's
And also you lose that in your bones feeling, and the people don't get it in their face. And of course, a Marshall is so directional. So if you're like standing in front of your favorite player, you're getting bombarded right in your face. That's why you see a lot of the guys with the plexi glass in front of the amp to deflect it. And I mean, many times I used to play with the cabinet backwards, and so I could still get thump and hear it. Or a few times I would put it on the side facing in, and, much to the chagrin of the band, but, Randy Rhoads used to have his rig on the side pointing in. And, at least at one point, I don't want to speak like I'm an authority on that, but, uh, and it's okay. The in-ear thing works. Um, it is kind of cool because you have this mix that's kind of like a record, and but you don't have that thump. Like I went to see Journey, and the bass player Ross Valerie, he had a original Jackson from, he had it forever, a Jackson soloist bass, and they're all on in-ears. So he said, uh, I'm like, your bass is amazing. That thing's cool. He's like, want to try it? And it's got this thing on the strap that thumps you. So when you hit the bass, you feel it, because without it, you're just hearing it, And I mean, also the other thing with the modelers and the in-ears, touring's so expensive unless you're a big boy or big girl. Um, you can't afford to ship all that stuff around. Now, you can certainly rent overseas, but then you're getting a DSL 100 that everybody's pummeled at the, brutal assault fest or something. And, it's a variable. So I get all that. And it's like, we want to have the guitar vault filled with all the cool guitars, but now they got those 2 guitar holder in plastic cases because it's efficient and, it's simple, and the stuff gets there in one piece most of the time. So the logistics is hard. The finances are hard. It's so hard to make money playing in a band. And if you're not already been into this for a long time, you're suffering. You're willing to sleep in a van and pull a trailer. I'm not doing that. I don't care. I don't need to play another gig in my life. I'm good. And I mean, I'll do, if anyone out there wants to hire me and fly me first class, and, I can stay at the Four Seasons, then I'm all for that.
Which has happened, of course,
I
right?
mean, those things happen. And, I'm not actively trying to do anything except work and stay home. And, you know, after years and years of doing this, unless it's, the thing with touring, whether you're in a band, like as a hired gun or as a tech, uh, is it's great while you're doing it. The money's cool. Things are happening. You're hanging out. You're eating food and having some wine or whatever. But then the tour ends and there's no more money. So you got to get back and hustle. And you'll have to, a lot of guys are working, but they're taking gigs that they might like the gig, but it's not necessarily the same financial tier or the same high quality travel and comfort. Uh, you know, it, and I don't want to I don't want to have those 2 months off anymore.
Consistency to sleeping in the same bed, in your own bed is a nice thing.
I've spent,
There's something to it.
I've spent most of my adult life living in hotels. So, and I'm not bitching about it either, you know, and
I had read years ago, I forget, it was like very random, and somewhere I had heard that Tico Torres, the drummer in Bon Jovi, had designed his bedroom like a hotel, and then afterwards he went, holy shit, like I made this like a Four Seasons hotel or something. I mean, I didn't even realize it, that he was just so used to that. He was like, well, you put the picture there and you put the end table over there. It's just like, which I thought was kind of funny, like, just, and not even realizing he did that.
well, they do sell those beds like from the Four Seasons and the Ritz Carlton, and they're
Do
pretty
they?
comfortable. Yeah, you can order them. I know that a tour manager friend of mine, he did that years ago. He's like, this bed is really great. So he looked on the tag and like looked up what it was, and you could order it. I believe you could order it through the hotel. Yes.
I
If
didn't
you
know
love
that.
how you slept, step on board.
Here you go. Yeah, including the sheets and everything else, right?
Yes, yes. We
So
like that fine linen.
So it was at least 3 years ago we were talking, and since we're on this on the road thing, and you were doing something, right? Was it a Venom thing that you'd put together, or Cronus, and you guys got into some kind of like accident with the van and you got all
So that
broken?
was that's Venom Incorporated, Venom Inc. So we've got all the spin-off bands, right? At this point, there's three. Um, so Venom Inc. was Mantis on guitar, Abaddon on drums, and this fellow Tony Dolan, also known as Demolition Man, who came into Venom after after Kronos and I and Jimmy Clare left, or whatever happened. It was 88 or something. And so he came in, and then it all starts, it's the family tree stuff. Um, so I'd known him since I lived in England in the early days, and he was in a band called Atomcraft. So we used to go to the pub, and we always just got along really well. And like I went to see Venom Inc. And I just went to visit as like I bombarded them without telling them. Like I told Sammy from Goat Whore, because they were opening. I'm like, yeah, I'm coming down, dude. I'll hit you when I get there. Don't tell them. And then they're like, oh, dude, you got to get up and play. And I'm like, oh, I'm not prepared, but I'll do it anyway. So time goes by, and Mantis has some heart problems, and then his wife had some medical issues, and he couldn't do this U.S. tour. So Tony Dolan approached me and said, would you be interested in doing it? Because it's not like just getting some guy off the street. And they had already postponed dates and stuff. So I said, you know what? It's only a few weeks. So I relearned songs. I sat on Zoom with Mantis and made sure I was playing stuff more correctly, not just the way I learned it, or not just, I asked him about specific leads and stuff. And so I did that, and we were coming through Georgia to Florida, and I don't know what happened because I was sleeping in the van. And so we hit a trailer truck. Luckily, nobody was severely injured. The van was torn apart, but it still kind of ran. We made it to Florida, but I've got a permanent scar, blood, and I said right then, well, this is the last van. You know, I'll finish the tour, but I'm never doing this again. And then I was going to continue. There was some other interband politics, I guess, and the drummer left, and then there was going to be a new drummer, and I was like, man. And then I had some other stuff go on in my life, so I was like, I got to just step back. And plus, it I'm playing someone else's songs, even though I love those riffs and I have total respect for Mantis. He's unwittingly a big influence on me because I had to learn his stuff. And I learned a lot of it incorrectly because I thought I was some smart ass guitar player. And so, and he gave me, we'd get on Zoom for like 2 hours at a time and prep up for the thing. So, in a couple of weeks, I revisited and learned more songs, but, I got like 23 songs together. And then I literally went from my living room to a gig in Brooklyn, and all we did was sound check one song, and then we just went for it, and it was terrifying, you know. And but I did bring, I did have two heads, and we had two 412s, and we played as loud as they would let us. But
Right.
uh, and so I mean, those guys have all done whatever now, and I'm just kind of like out of the whole drama, interband politics. Everybody can do what they want, and I just don't want to play those riffs or that way anymore.
So then, I would bounce around a little bit. So you went when you were starting out, um, you got pulled in by Kiss and bands like that, right? And then at some point, you end up at Berklee, right?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
and
so now
and
you're a New England guy, so Berkeley's not how far is Boston from you? Even when you were a kid, were you still close?
when I was a kid, it was about 45 minutes.
Okay, so were you staying on campus or were you commuting?
No, I was in the dorm, and what had happened is my high school guitar buddy had gone for the summer session, and he was a Charvel guy and a Marshall guy, and so I'd go down and hang out. And I was already going to go in the fall in September, and so he started playing with these guys. One of them being our mutual friend, Derek Shirini.
Yeah.
So I meet Derek at, we're just hanging in the dorm. So I remember him, and my
How did
buddy,
you get him?
yeah, how do you forget him?
Yeah.
And so when I got there in September, I'm literally walking down Mass Avenue, probably to go to the Tedeschi convenience store, and um, he walks around the corner, and he's like, "Bro," and I'm like, "Dude," So we just start chatting, and he's like, we got to jam." So we started like this little metal fusion band, which I had a full stack when I was in school. So
Of
and
course. Yeah.
of course his playing was basically fully formed. I think he was 17 then, and because he got like a scholarship, and so like he basically played all the licks back then. They just weren't as like now. It's like it just falls out of his fingers. But he was super advanced. So we jammed, did a few semesters, and then we're all our buddies were like, let's get out of here. Let's go to California. And Derek already lived there. So I moved out to um, stay with his parents and him
And so
in
he was in SoCal, right? Or at, Santa
Santa Cruz.
Cruz, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and then that just started snowballing, and then it was like, well, we got to go to LA. So I literally had my Jackson Roads, a bag of clothes, $150, and got on a Greyhound down to LA and got off. Didn't have a good plan, but and then it just then that just starts the whole ball rolling. And if you're gonna do that stuff, people can do it now from the internet and their room and whatever. But then you had to be like, I'm going to LA, I'm going to New York, or I'm going to Nashville.
Yeah.
That's it. You don't
Yeah.
go like, oh, I want to go to Topeka, Kansas, you know?
Yeah. No, absolutely. So I was roommates with Derek for a while. So
Right.
I did a similar thing. I drove from Queens basically to LA, and I was roommates with Derek Sherinian and Greg D'Angelo, right? And Greg's
Right.
my cousin. So
That's right.
so and he had been like, dude, you got to get out of New York. There's no scene in New York right now, to speak of, and you should come out and, like I can introduce you to people and things like that. So I pretty much couch surfed in that house. And, Derek, the doorbell would ring at the house and you never knew who was going to be there. And because it's Derek would be like, Thomas, there's someone
Yeah.
on the ground. This is the kind of shit that I would get from him, right? There's someone on the grounds. I don't know if they're supposed to be here. See who it is, So I
Was
was,
he in, was he in Alice Cooper's band
he was
then?
in Alice at this point, and
Uh-huh.
Greg was the White Lion thing had been unfolding, and he was playing with Zach and James in the first iteration of Pride and Glory. And at that time they were actually, it was pre Pride and Glory. It was they called the band Leonard Skinhead, and they were playing like Coconut Teaser and different places just around, like if somebody was having a party, Zach would be like, fuck it, let's go. And they'd play. And I was kind of just following them around. Zach was using my guitar when they would come and rehearse at the house. And yeah, that was Derek though. Like, Thomas, someone's on the grounds. And oddly, because of who they were, and they were sort of dialed into that scene, every once in a while I'd open the door to see who it was, and instead of it being the mailman or the UPS guy, it was, like Glenn Hughes one day. He's opened the door and I'm like, oh shit, it's Glenn Hughes. Come on in. What's up, mate? Like just crazy shit. but that was my experience with Derek. I don't even know if he remembers this, but I think it was his 30th birthday, and they had a big party at the house, and he got really drunk, like really like you may die kind of drunk. And I stayed with him in his room and just stared at him for like 4 hours to make sure,
Breathing.
just make sure he was breathing and make sure he didn't throw up and kill himself, because he's not that guy. You know what I mean? Like, it's just some people that are professional drunks. That's not him, But he went way out of control. And it was just like, and everybody else was kind of like doing their own thing. And it was like, I got to watch, not on my watch is this guy going to have a problem. So I just stared at him honestly for like 4 or 5 hours until he came to, you know, but, yeah. Yeah. So I know him for years.
Yeah, I mean, he's still one of my dearest friends, and we're in communication, you know, if not every day, every 2 days.
Okay. I speak to him like once every probably 2 or 3 years, maybe. There's some kind of communication, like whether it's like a text or Instagram or something, but not as much as you.
Yeah, and I mean, we're both very, cynical, and we're very opinionated on guitar playing and,
Yeah.
things, so and then, of course, Derek played in Bonamassa's band, not just black country, but he played in the actual blues rock band for a few tours, and I was working there then. So the three of us are like the stuff is just it's pure guitar comedy,
Yeah. I
and,
could only imagine.
like I just recently had Derek play on a song. I've been in the studio, and I said, "Hey, I'll send you this track. If you dig it, rip on it. Your solo's here." And I'm sorry it's short, but I'm doing the long and winding fade out. And he wrote back and he says, "I'll have it done in an hour. I'm taking your solo."
Yeah, of course. Of course he is.
And then of course he laid down the solo, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
you can have the solo, dude. I'm not so, narcissistic that I need to play all the lead or whatever. I often will have my friends play solos just so it doesn't sound like me playing guitar, bass, engineering bad sounds, and so he's ripped up some cool shit for me over the past few years, and I just got to finish it all.
That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's fun.
So
And
so you guys are at Berklee, and they put that so you have that connection. And then so who else was there at that time? Was it Al Petrelli? It was he.
Petrelli was like the ringleader because he was the best uh, player, right? Um, and he had long hair, and he's got this great picking style that it's in the thumb and the finger. It's
Right.
not like me like this or normal people. Um, and he was a real in our group of people, he was kind of the big boy. And then we had another guy named Jim Odom who went on. He was in a band called LaRue from Louisiana, and
Okay.
he shows
Familiar.
up,
Yeah.
and he's equally ripping, if not better than Al at the time. And because he had already been out with LaRue doing albums, but he wanted to learn more. And so there was like him, and not so much in our world, but like people like Will Calhoun were there, and but the general group, there was like 7 or 8 of us who were just like, it's not that we were advanced, we just loved to play. We weren't necessarily there just to study. We were there because Berklee's biggest feature is not that you can learn harmony and arranging and seventh chords. It's that people from all over the world end up on this one street, and they all want to jam and they all want to play.
Yeah.
So the band Derek and I put together, we would you could get a rehearsal room for 2 hours. So we would get the same room for 6
At Berkeley.
at Berklee. You had to sign up, wait in line, and so we'd get the same room for 6 hours, and then we were, like, playing Mr. Crowley and things, and like, they're knocking on the door like, "Hey, we can't hear the upright bass," and we're like, "Yeah, go away," "We don't care." So, it was a great learning experience, and then, of course, when we transitioned down to LA, everybody starts getting, I'm trying to join any band. I'm looking in the music connection paper. I'm looking in the back of BAM and, auditioning and not really knowing what I'm doing. I'm not really good at auditioning at the time. And it's usually short term. Like it's like, oh dude, come over tonight and just play with us. But then, there's standard rock songs and stuff. So, um, you know, the you've just got to be in a group of people in any genre where that's what their concern is playing and moving forward. And, you know, and there's tons of guys out there then, more so now, that are just unbelievable. And, uh, it's just the network of friends and pa- com- compadres.
Let's talk guitars, because
Yeah.
I know that's really our probably biggest love. Um, I think we've had guitar connections to the two of us through the years. So at one point, Joe came to the Music Zoo to do, like we're Gibson dealers, longtime Gibson dealers, and we're made to measure dealers, right? So I'm the guy that's just like, I'm going to build a one pickup Les Paul with a wraparound, but not a Junior. I'm going to put a humbucker in it. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And it's going to be a wacky color. And let's put a Floyd Rose on it. And so that's what that program allows you to do. And Joe, they had brought Joe in to basically do a video to talk about the program. And in fact, we still have the guitar, and Joe was here last week, and we still have, he did a basically a rendition of Snakebite in the custom shop, remade that guitar like as close as they possibly could get. He took it on the road, right? Because
That's the guitar. Yeah. And we sent it back.
He took it on the road, he toured with it, and then it came back to us, and we were supposed to do, and it's probably going to happen at some point, we're going to do a giveaway for charity for the guitar. And the word on the street, of course, the custom shop loves to say that he liked it more than the real Snakebite, which what's that?
No, he didn't.
He didn't? Okay. All right.
No, it's a great guitar, but I mean,
you buzz killed some people, but it's I played it. I mean, and the thing that I asked you when we got it was tuned to F, and I was like, why is this right? For whatever reason, whatever song he was using, it was tuned to, and probably still is.
Slide, I think. I think it was
okay.
Slide.
Okay. So it's still here, and we just talked about it last week. We're going to do some kind of giveaway. So anyway, while Joe is at the Music Zoo and he's in my office, and like this is, I knew who he was, and I've seen him play several times, and I knew him, I guess, when he was smoking Joe Bonamassa as a kid, right? And he comes into my office, and I had a Hamer Standard in a stand, right? He goes, "How much?" I was like,
Not for sale.
I was like, "That's my guitar." Yeah, how much? And I'm like, it's not for sale. This is what I pick it up between emails and just kind of relieve some stress and play a little bit. So he splits. One of the other guys from the office comes in and goes, "Dude, it's Bonamassa. You can't not sell him that guitar." And I'm like, "Yeah, I can. I like this." So, story short, after an hour or so of going back and forth, he charmed it out of me, and he he rope-a-doped me as well. So I see the way he is with guitar buying. He's got a knack for guitar buying and haggling and what have you. So he bought the guitar dirt cheap, if you will, right? And you ended up with it.
Yes. So we were at the Westbury thing where it goes around and around.
Yep.
And
Westbury Music Fair, Long Island.
Yep.
Yep.
And so he walks in, and of course, I see the case, and he's walking over with it, and I'm like, son of a bitch. And I see the grin, and he's like, congratulations. Here's your new Hamer. 2 things. You owe me X amount of dollars. Pay me whenever. And I'm using it tonight. And I'm like, done deal. And I had already bought 2 Hamers previous to that, which he also helped finance. Um, the Bank of Masa, I call him.
Yeah.
So he basically, when you're buying a rare guitar or a coveted guitar, you got to make the deal. And so, like, the first one I got belonged to the guy in my hometown who was older than me, and he bought it brand new. And I chased him for 30 years, like, dude, sell me your hammer. Oh, no, I don't need the money. I don't need the money. And then out of the blue, he calls me. I happen to be at a local gig. Um, he sent a note with some friends. Here's my number. I'm ready to sell. So, I went straight to Joe's dressing room and I'm like, "Hey, can I borrow some money?" And he's like, "For what?" I said, "Hammer." He goes, "The hammer?" I said, "The one I've been talking about." He's like, "Oh, yeah, definitely." You know. So, and so I still have that, and then I bought a second one in Germany, and then he gave me the Tommy Colletti model.
Which do you still have it?
I do not. I gave it back to Joe as a gift.
Okay.
And because he was like, going, I said I might get rid of a hammer. He goes, "Oh, I'll buy one." I'm like, "I don't want your money, he still does a lot of stuff for me. So he's a very generous person. And so, I brought it to him and he toured with it for a while. It's probably in the lockup now and stuff. And he said to me a while back, he's like, I got to send that back to you. I'm like, you know what, whatever, just keep it. If you send it, then bring it out on the road, and when you're local to me, I'll just pick it up because shipping a hammer could be the
Yeah,
end of the world,
that's true.
you
Yeah.
know. And but I'm trying to get down to having like two hammers, two Les Pauls, two Tellys, just
The Noah's Ark of guitars.
yeah, yeah, and I mean I'm down to like 12 Charvels from 22.
Okay.
So and
Think I helped you with that. Yeah.
yeah, well, a couple of them it makes sense, like with your marketing, and also when people are trying to buy that stuff in Charvel world, they want the bro deal. And usually they have more money than me. So why do I want to give you money off when I need the money? And this, like, all this stuff here looks, people like, "Oh, look at all you've got." Well, this is like, most of these I've had over 20 years. So it's not like I just went shopping yesterday. I mean, and people are generous to me. Mike Tempesta has hooked me up with some cool guitars because we both love Van Halen, and you helped with that. And my friend Ian at Wild West, he's hooked me up with some stuff, and everyone's just super generous. What's funny is when you can't afford anything, you can't get anything. Not even a pack of strings.
Yeah. That's weird how that works, but it is, and it's still like that.
Yes.
Because people want, like, if you're a manufacturer, you want whoever to be seen with your thing. It still works that way, and it still does work. I mean, look at the Van Halen thing, right? Like, we both, I'm sure, separately got Van Halen one and looked at the back, and it said Charvel Manufacturing, and the wheels started turning. Like,
Yeah,
what?
that's because of my friend Sean in high school. Um, you know, I mean, we were totally into Van Halen, and we had built uh like from the Music Emporium catalog. Uh,
Yeah.
we bought parts and stuff, and I bought a early Floyd Rose out of the local, advertiser paper, and grabbed a drill and just we put it in a Strat and we striped it, and then we built him a black and yellow with the DiMarzio parts, and so then later on, uh, probably senior year, he orders a striped guitar, and then he gets it, and it's got the Floyd with no tuners. It's really cool. And so I order one shortly, like around that time, like right after his arrived,
Right.
and I still have that, and I actually still have his. And
These are both Charvels you're talking about. So you ordered them from a local
local
store.
store, the guy was really cool to us. He'd give us credit. He was super great. He's passed away now. And so he called Jackson and Charvel, and they said, "You have to order 3 guitars. You can become a dealer." So he goes, "Well, I'll order one. Sean will order one,
And they have one for the store.
and Michael order one."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I traded in my Dean towards it, and
What
then, you know,
what's what store was it? Do you remember the name of the store?
it was called Strings and Things in Gardner, Massachusetts.
Well, yeah, that's that
Well,
I went yeah,
you're probably thinking of Strings and Things in Memphis,
Memphis. Okay, that's what
right?
right.
No affiliation, but the guy was playing at my school dinner dance in his cover band, and he had this crazy F5 mandolin looking guitar. So I started talking to him. I'm like, man, I want to get a Hamer. He goes, oh, what you need is a Dean. And he had the catalog, the little square one, in his briefcase. And so he sold me on the Dean. And then because, you know, the Charvel thing was starting to take off, I wanted to be like that all of a sudden. So like I couldn't keep everything. So I traded that, and it just getting the Charvel was the changing of the guard, you know?
Yeah. God, yeah. Yeah, it changed your playing immediately. It got you closer to it dare I say, it got you closer to Edward, right? So, like, you
Or
know, like
Holdsworth,
yeah, you could play that style on those guitars much easier than a Les Paul or certainly a 335 or, like, so that guitar really made you that much closer, you know?
yeah.
Um, did you have so Dimebag ends up with a ML. Was that your guitar?
He
Or
well, okay, this is like years go by, my guitar gets Kailered, um, and, I'm way past it by then, and it also had a
the ML you're talking about.
ML, yeah. So I got that in '81. I kept it till '83. It had been re-necked because I dropped it, because of the strap on the back. And so Dean re-necked it with a smaller V, which would have been correct for the time. And so trading it off really didn't break my heart. And so fast forward to the early '90s, I'm watching my friend's little guitar shop, and I see this kid walking down the street with the ML. And I'm like, oh, no, this can't even be happening. And he walks in the shop. He's like, hey, man, do you want to buy this? And I'm like, not really, And he goes, it was your guitar, though. And I'm like, yeah, but, I'm over it. So he asked me for an extremely low amount of money and a microphone with a wired cable and a little switch.
Remember
And I'm,
them well?
and I'm like, done deal. Oddly enough, my friend at the music store had the original case for some weird reason. So I buy it back for, I put the money up out of the till. Then I give my friend $100 for letting me get the guitar. And then I hear Pantera for the first time. And I'm like, geez, I can't go out in public with an ML, you know? So I drive down to the gig, and they don't know me from anybody. And I knock on the bus door, and Phil comes to the door. And I said, hey, man, my name's Mike. I play with Kronos from Venom. And he's like, bullshit, you're not British, and, I'm like, yeah, well, I came to see Diamond Darrell, and
Diamond, yeah.
yeah,
At that
yeah.
time, yeah, yeah.
And so Darrell comes out, and, Phil brings me in the bus. Darrell comes out of the back, and I'm like, hey, man, I got this ML in the car. He goes, you want to sell it, dude? You just bring it to show me? I'm like, I'll sell it to you. I won't sell it to anyone else, but, I'll hook you up. So I take him to the car, open the back. He's like, God damn, dude. Yeah. Woo, how, woo, all that. And so we agree on a price, which was very low. And, he whips out the cash. We go back in the venue, and like, they were opening for Skid Row. So we're looking at the serial numbers, and it's like very close to his original,
Right.
one of his original ones. And so we're all fired up about it. And, so we become friendly, you know, we weren't, calling each other on the phone every day or hanging out, but I'd go hang out a little bit with him. And, then of course, tragedy strikes, and that guitar is still in the collection because I've seen a picture, because it's got a crooked Kaler, just, but, and it, it it's that's where that guitar belonged.
Yeah,
So
for
make,
sure.
Makes me happy, you know?
So like you, I had a Dean Z. It was cherry sunburst, and I had purchased it at Manny's on 48th Street, and probably it was either 1979 or 1980, somewhere around there. And I got the guitar, and I loved it, but after probably a few months, the neck started kind of just drifting. They used to twist.
Mhm.
And I brought the guitar. I was a kid, right? So I bring the guitar back, I believe, with my mom. Go back to Manny's with this guitar with this twisted neck that couldn't be. You couldn't truss rod it straight. And back then, if you remember, like I'm still probably going on today. Like they used to steam necks, right? That was
Yes.
a
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
You don't hear it as much now, or maybe that's not my world as much, so I'm not hearing it. But um, that was in my head, like, "Oh my god, I hope I don't have to have this happen to this guitar." And and while I was in Manny's, the sales guy was just like, "Well, we'll just bring up another guitar for you, you know, like we have several Dean guitars here, and we'll just start bringing, bring up another one, we're gonna find you one that you like." And they brought in an ML, it might have been Brasilia Burst, I believe it was. They had a black one, they had a white one. I played a Cadillac. I played probably 7 or 8 guitars, and all of them had, like, this twist in the neck, like, after, like, maybe the 5th, 4th, 3rd fret, like, the neck towards the headstock just started making, like, a turn, and they're, the sales guy, they're trying to keep the sale, right? So they're screwing with the truss rod and all this stuff. So I don't know if it was because of the way that they were storing the guitars at Manny's, maybe in the basement. Who knows? Like people weren't thinking about humidification back then or anything like that. Or it was maybe Dean Zielinski using wood that wasn't really cured enough, and he was, like there was a frenzy for his guitars, and he was building them probably out of stuff that he shouldn't have been, or I don't know.
And maybe he didn't, maybe, because he was really young
True.
when he was doing that, and maybe he didn't know all the logistics of, you
How
know,
you laying the
wood.
fretboard, the board in, and yeah, like making sure the truss rod is actually in right, so it's doing what it's supposed to. But there was a who knows what happened to those guitars. I'm sure they didn't cut them in half. I'm sure somebody figured out how to make them right again, whether they took the boards off and started fresh, or they went back to Dean and he actually fixed them. But yeah, they literally went through every guitar, and after that, I was kind of buzzkilled, and that was it for Dean. I forget what I walked out of there, either with a credit or with like a Les Paul or something different. And back then, they were Dean dealers and Gibson dealers, but they weren't Charvel. Charvel was interesting. Like 48th Street didn't grasp the Charvel Jackson thing until later on,
Like,
because
it was Grayson's, right? Which
it
was
was Grayson's. So Grayson's at some point had a store on 48th Street, and then that store wound up closing, and they moved out to Long Island. And Long Island at the time, there was a Sam Ash down the street from them in Hempstead, and I think that they got the flow over, right? So people would make you know what this is about, pre-internet, right? You get in the car, usually with a buddy, especially on a weekend, right? And you just go, you've termed the coin guitar safari, right? You just go to 5 or 6 stores looking at guitars. And because they were literally right down the street from Sam Ash, it was a definite spot. So for all the advertising that Sam Ash was doing, all the guitar players would walk in that Hempstead store, and then they'd go 3 blocks down to it was Franklin Avenue in Hempstead, which is now a pretty bad neighborhood. You wouldn't want to have a guitar store there. Um, but yeah, they were the place that had Charvels back then, and the only place like East Coast. And I think that for what it's worth, Bernie Grayson had a pretty good vision of like knowing what the next thing was going to be before everybody else. And Grover, I think, was pretty good about keeping Sam Ash or Manny's or anybody else from taking it, because he was the one that made the commitment first. So he honored that. And I think that for what it's worth, I think that happened to him with DiMarzio as well. When Larry was selling the pickups, I think Bernie was one of the first people that was just like, this is great. And he kept people from buying it in other places. Maybe somebody on 48th Street, Guitar Man or one of those stores had it, but Larry kept he kept everything very separate, and he protected dealers for a while. I think someone had told me a story that Grayson's was selling so many DiMarzio pickups that Bernie woke up one day and was just like, "We got to make a pickup." And as soon as Larry found out that he was making his own little Grayson pickups or whatever the hell he was doing, Larry started selling to everybody. Um, but I always thought that was funny with Charvel. So that was the place to go, certainly on Long Island, to get a Charvel. And they had a nice selection too. You could walk into 1980, 81, and they'd have 15 Charvels, candy stripe, the bird's eye maple with the matching headstocks, all that stars. They had everything, you know.
Yeah,
Uh,
we had it up in Boston, we had Daddy's Junkie Music right across from Berklee, and so they always had, a selection of Charvels, you know, that they had what people don't understand, like, you see it on Reverb now and stuff, it's like everything's a pre-production, and, you know, every single like, Grover wasn't just making random guitars, they were made for the dealer would select the specs, and this is my opinion, it could be mostly facts, I think, and then, of course, you know, Kramer comes along, they get the Floyd Rose exclusive, so then you're seeing all these Charvels with Kahlers, and, um, and then to circumvent that, when I had my Rhodes built in '84, I went to EU Wurlitzer in Boston, and I bought a Floyd Rose, and I mailed it to Jackson. 'Cause I wanted a Floyd on my Jackson, and of course, like, when I got my first Charvel, Joanne talked me into the pointy head because it's like Randy Rhoads, but what I wanted was a matching red Strat head that looked like Allan Holdsworth, but with a Floyd and, you know, stuff like that, and, I mean, it's fine now. If I knew I could have demanded the Strat head, I would have definitely done that,
yeah.
but it was still cool, and I got the matching head and, you know, you know, and I still have the guitar, it's been broken, refretted, scalloped, trem routed, all that.
So the thing I find interesting, one of the many things I find interesting with you is that even though you're a guitar lover, right? And you've been around bursts and tons of vintage instruments on your own, as well as with Joe and looking at bursts. You know, like I know you've handled several dozen, hundreds at this point.
100.
Um, V's, Explorers, and what have you. You still see the beauty, and I want to talk to you about all that stuff too, but do you still see the beauty in the Charvel and the Jackson guitar? And I think, you know, in a lot of the older guitar dealers, collectors, and people that I know, and I won't name names, but you know some of these people, they're very like, if you're not playing a burst, you're an idiot. You know, like, or if you're not, you know, like it, like they're very basically, for them, between 1955 or 56 and like 60 is when it all happened. And if you're playing guitar anywhere other than that in the era, you're a knucklehead. And and you know, of course, I have a different opinion, right? And some of the music that we grew up with wasn't made with those guitars. Was was made with a Charvel, obviously Edward, Randy. All these people were able to figure it out without playing a burst. So that's what the beauty I find it in that you appreciate these guitars like I do, because early on in the Music Zoo history, I was I was chasing the Charvel thing very early on, and I remember when they had come out with they it was a 25th anniversary or a 35th, 30th, whatever that guitar was. I remember calling my friend at Fender and going, "You got it all wrong."
I
And
have one of those.
you have one?
Yeah.
I mean, they're cool, but they to me, they didn't harken back to what a Charvel was. It
Well,
didn't feel
they had, like, pearl dots,
Avalon
avalanche dots or whatever,
Avalon, yeah.
and the back plate was recessed, and the neck was great. I mean, my neck literally changes between chords in terms of, you know, because there's so much figuring, I don't think it's stable,
The
and
figuring, yeah.
and, you know, I still have the guitar, I don't even I haven't pulled it out in a couple of years, and I feel bad about it, but on the other hand, what's it worth? Like, is it worth selling, or should I just keep it and use it occasionally. I don't know.
Well, it's certainly part of history, and it's a cool guitar.
Yeah,
I
and it
love
was a Mike Shannon situation, so
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah, but I thought and the person I know who the guy was that was putting that all together, and he was I don't think he was as big a fan of Charvel or knew the history as much as, let's say, we did. So, like, if the 2 of us were in that room going like, "Hey, we wanna make an anniversary guitar," the 2 of us would be reciting all of the specs that need to, like, happen, right? And
yes.
I don't think that necessarily happened because he wasn't as much of a fan, so he didn't really wasn't able to pull from 50 feet away, it certainly looks just right, but, as you get closer
It's crazy. I mean, the top on it is super flamed,
Yeah.
and the neck profile is very nice. I mean, it's not correct. It's not like this particular neck, which is real. Um, and the thing is, like, what you did, it when you started doing the Music Zoo versions, you kinda, like, you took that idea that they had, and then you went, "Okay, well, now here's a guy that knows, and I have friends who know, and I have player friends, professionals who know." And then you started, like, one of my buddies who's a great player down in the Boston area, he's still got one of those mahogany,
Yeah,
oil,
and
and
fun.
it's a great guitar. It doesn't matter if it said Joe Blow on the headstock. You know what I mean? It's just a
Yeah.
great guitar, and
I could tell you how that whole thing came about too. Um, 2 things were happening, like, that could and I believe before the anniversary guitar came out, everything that we were getting had the hockey stick headstock, and I drop his name all the time because I he was such an asset to me at Fender, and his name is Jeff Carey. And
Mhm.
Jeff was basically the guy that was overseeing all of specialty. So if it didn't, and what specialty means in the for the novice that doesn't know Fender, it's everything that doesn't say Fender on the headstock that Fender owns. So Gretsch, Charvel, Jackson, they owned Groove Tubes at one point. They owned Tacoma, even though they never did anything with that brand. They own Hamer, believe it or not, but they've never done anything with that brand.
I think they
Uh,
stole Gamer now, but, nobody's doing anything good with it, and
right. So they had Charvel and nothing was really going on. And I went to Jeff and I was like, dude, I have an idea for all of this stuff. And I was like, the first thing that's gotta happen is you need the Strat headstock. You have to have the Strat headstock because that's when I look at a Charvel, I'm thinking of Edward, I'm thinking of Jakey Lee and Warren DeMartini, and Nuno played an early Charvel for what it's worth. That first record, I think, was a Charvel before he started his affiliation with Washburn. There was so many of those guys that were playing this, obviously Holdsworth, and they were still really kind of like set on, oh, it's going to be a big problem, and I don't know how we're going to do it, and the lawyers. And what had happened in the early days is they would put a little sticker on the back of
yeah,
the Charvel
mhm,
headstock that said,
so annoying.
this is licensed by the Fender Musical Corporation. Even though they own it, they had to somehow do the lawyers had to play with this whole thing. But he wound up helping me get that over, past the goalie. And then we started releasing all those guitars with Strat headstocks. And then the oil thing actually happened for 2 reasons. If you remember, like, obviously in the early days of Charvel, you could buy bodies and necks, right? And a lot of those bodies were just raw. They were unpainted, and then it was for you to figure out how to paint, right? But several when Grover decided that he was going to start making just guitars and not selling the parts, a lot of those were just oil finished guitars. And I owned one, which I sadly got rid of. Um, and the guitar sounded great and it resonated great. And I was like, well, what's going on? And what was going on is there's no polyurethane finish on the guitar. So it immediately is going to vibrate more, give you a little bit more just, like resonance or whatever. And then the other part of it is when guitars would go to paint, a lot of times with graphics, they would go to Dan Lawrence, right? And still to this day, Dan is painting everything. And Dan, when stuff goes to Dan, it'll sit there for 6 months waiting in line to get a Warren DeMartini cross swords or whatever. And I was like, I don't want to wait that long. How do we, like, we already know the guitars sound amazing. So it was Chip Ellis and Mike Eldred actually came up with the oil formula to oil those guitars. And they didn't want to tell me exactly what it is, but through the years, I kind of figured it out. It was basically, uh, the true oil
True,
and
yeah,
sometimes gunstock oil. and then they would mix it with Chip told me, he goes, "It's basically Mop and Glow, but it was a different version of Mop and Glow, and it had, like, a wax in there." So the between the true oil and the wax would kinda seal everything, so the guitars would come in okay. And the other part of this was, um they were handmade custom guitars. So it was either Chip, Ellis, Red Dave, Shannon, and all those guys were making the guitars. And I was selling them. I mean, we're going back a long time. It's 25 years, 30 years ago, but they were $12.99 for a custom shop Charvel with the case, with the G&G case, you know? And we sold a crap load of them. I still have one of the original ones here that I kept for myself. It's just like, I don't know if it was serial number 1 or whatever, but I just thought it was so cool. Um, and for what it's worth, since that, for 20 something years, they've still let me run with it. So I'm the dealer that still runs these oil guitars. And I guess as soon as I stop buying them, they'll probably come to me and go, "Hey, if you don't buy any, we're gonna let somebody else have it." But they've been really cool about selling those things. And they sorry for the long dissertation, but it's something I'm so passionate about the Charvel thing. I'm actually speaking with Michael Charvel next week, which I'm pretty excited about. Um,
Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
just
I was selling a Charvel online and some guy says, "Can you get it authenticated?" I'm like, I don't need to do that. Obviously, it's not for you because if you don't know what you're looking at, you don't wanna buy this guitar." He goes, "Well, could you get Michael to do it?" I said, "Michael? What, like Mike Shannon?" He goes, "No, Michael Charvel." I'm like, "He wasn't even born when this thing was built."
yeah.
Like, what are you talking about, dude? You know?
There's
But
there there's a lot of stuff. I mean, Mike and I have been friends for years, and I mean, his dad is still Wayne Charvel, right? And there's and working alongside his dad and learning a lot of stuff. For what it's worth, the Wayne guitars when they would come because we were Wayne dealers as well, and those guitars play like nothing else. Like his setup is nuts, like the setup that Wayne's able to do or was able to do on guitars, just they were effortless. And also another just a quick connection when Fender, Edward Van Halen, EVH released those the eruption guitars, the black and white, the first iteration, the black and white guitars. Edward worked with Chip to get the setup right. Because remember, that when those guitars came out, Edward wound the strings up the peg instead of down the peg for tuning purposes, and he did all sorts of weird, like winding at the
he
bridge.
turned the string as he was when he was putting
Right.
it
So it's all sorts of stuff. And Ed worked with Chip to go through, like, this is actually how I used to keep the guitar back in tune back then. And there was the super eruption, which Edward played eight he played Eruption 8 times and videoed it and signed the back of the headstock. That was a lot of money. And then there was the Relict Eruption, which was also a lot of money. But Chip did the setup on all those guitars. I think the NOS guitars, as they started making more, maybe it got like a little filtered out from Chip. But Edward showed the setup to Chip, and Chip emulated that. And those guitars play just like Wayne's setups. Like the strings are, I mean, they're basically, I couldn't give you I never measured it, but it's super close, like just zero effort. Um, and for what the Charvels don't come in like that, but the Waynes had their own thing. Um, and I'm curious to talk to Michael next week about it because we talked about it briefly on the phone last week, and he was telling me that they had a process, but he said that a lot of the process was like if a normal setup takes whatever 45 minutes or an hour on a guitar, he goes, they would sometimes spend like 2.5 hours just keep going churning and twisting and let's do it again and let's let it sit and go back to it again. But they were nuts. They were nuts. But yes, Michael wasn't there for like a lot of that stuff or most of it.
and I mean, the real so the history, everyone knows the history. Wayne's got the repair shop. He starts marketing stuff through with ISA, with the Schecter stuff, and he's got the boogie parts, and he's got the little ad where he's selling the stainless whammy
Brass.
and the brass jack plate,
Yep.
and then it expands as he finds out that here's this place I can get a brass bridge. We'll sell those, and he does great setups. and everybody's going there. And then, of course, Grover gets hired to work with him. And then there's financial despair, and Grover raises the cash, buys the brand, and then turns on the pin router. And then that's when everything changes. And he's not just grabbing a boogie neck, he's making his own neck. He's got Eldred in there, and um, and he's got Todd Krause. Then he gets Henry Boyle. Henry starts working on the Holdsworth guitar. And that guitar, even though everyone didn't realize it, that's the guitar that changed everything. Swift pull route underneath,
Yes.
not because of moving pickup. Well,
Just
maybe Allan,
it was
it,
weight.
it was weight,
Yeah.
and the 2.25-inch heel, um, you know, the ebony, thick ebony board. But the real thing is every other company followed suit and copied Grover's ideas, right down to the cast neck plate with the logo and the address. and
Yes.
and then there's Gibson with a pointy head. So there's Washburn, there's Hamer, and of course Hamer's a pioneer situation too in a different way. And but as soon as that code was cracked, all manufacturers followed suit and basically got in line behind Grover's ideas. And we're lucky, like, in our generation, there were so many forward-thinking guitar people. And because look at it, Leo Fender, Ted McCarty, that's pretty much it, right? Until, and of course, it's born out of that. You can pick up a 73 Strat and it's a turd, or you can pick one up and it's, wow, this thing's amazing.
It's
And
vintage now.
it is vintage.
It is vintage. Yeah.
And um, you know, a few weeks ago, my phone rings out of the blue and it's Grover Jackson. And I'm like, I don't answer the phone. I just get the message and I'm like, this isn't even real. And I call him. And of course, 2.5 hours later, we get off the phone. He's got so much information and history, and, you know, great to talk to him because he called me about Holdsworth's spruce guitar, which I owned for several years. And I don't know why he was calling about it because we got off on a tangent. And I said, well, no, I have detailed photos of it. I said, but when somebody offers you a certain amount of money for a Charvel, you call FedEx.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and like
It's
you know,
we wound up it might even still be in stock here, but we wound up doing a couple of spruce guitars just because I knew that Allan had requested them, and I thought it would be cool to chase him a little bit, and it's cool. Yeah, it's a
well,
cool guitar. Yeah.
so they made the three. There's more than three, but the three main ones, the red one, the white one, and the spruce one, the red one went on to be the flagship guitar for Allan. And I've actually played the real one a couple times, and I brought him mine at a gig once, and I wanted him to sign the headstock, and he's like, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to ruin your guitar, And it's like, those are three really different guitars. I played the white one before too, and then of course I owned the spruce, and the spruce was the only one he kept. So when he got the spruce one, it had a maple neck, a DiMarzio trem, one hum, and then over the years he kept the guitar for a long, long time, and he modified it to two pickups, and then a Kaler. And I mean, the Kaler's a deal breaker for me in the end. It's just, for me, it's an amazing design and stuff, but this is the trem right here. The Floyd is, if you're not going to be able to handle a vintage trem, which is really hard to keep in tune, this is the answer. And I'm comfortable with it. It feels normal when I,
Yeah,
it,
sure.
you know,
There's something to, and I know you know this, but there's something to mention for the folks at home is that the spacing on the DiMarzio bridge wasn't F spacing, it was Gibson spacing, which made the guitar feel a lot different too.
it keeps your strings inside Yeah,
Correct,
and
correct, and
also
they're hard to find too, like, every once in a while, one will pop up on eBay. I think I've bought a couple in my like, "Oh, I need that," and it sits in a drawer.
I have one that I'm hoarding.
It's like it's what happens, it sits in a drawer. I've spoken to Mike Tempesta about and I think they're speaking to is it his daughter? The estate, because I know that they wanted to I've been pressuring to do the guitar again, and the DiMarzio bridge was kinda part of it, so, like and, so that he was exploring, like, "Okay, could we get a bridge made?" You know, to fit, like, the whole so we get it right. And I think they're still they move slow, dude, so, like, it could be happening right now for all I know, and then but it's moving real slow, and hopefully, between having, like, you and me and people in the know, hopefully they get it right, you know?
Yeah, I told them I'd ship them my guitar so they could really, do it, and I'm like, "I have a spare bridge that I can loan you."
I
Um,
I had one of the red ones as a kid, and for whatever reason, I mean, it played fantastic. That was another one of those just because of the spacing in the bridge and the ebony board and just it was a very fast guitar. It's pre-Music Zoo, just like at home, and I love the guitar, but that guitar and hard rock and heavy metal didn't really work well. It worked well for Allan and for those tones and everything, but when you just wanted to just like rock out, it didn't do that as well as some of the other guitars.
yeah, it's for lack of a better word, it's got a spongy sound,
That was it. That was
right?
it.
It's
Yep.
I mean, playability wise, you can do all kinds of cool stuff on it, but it's really the neck's bigger too, and it's lacquered, uh, and it's it's a unique guitar, but I when I've tried to gig with it, like playing hard rock, it it really was lacking that cut that
Yeah.
like a maple neck would give you, and the Floyd, uh,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Swamp Ash is another important part of the
Yeah.
picture.
And for what it's worth, maybe the swimming pool round had something to do with that sound as
It
well.
certainly does, and, also Allan never had string trees,
Okay.
so, of course, the production versions, which there's probably I don't know, I think I tracked about 33 of them in the old days, like, I kept a list of Holdsworths, and I'm not talking about a Holdsworth that came with a Kaler, I'm only talking about with the DiMarzio bridge,
Alright.
uh,
Yeah.
because there were Holdsworth models with a Kaler, with all the specs,
So
but
they really didn't make that many of them.
no, I don't think so. Eh
I'm even more upset that I sold that back in but it just it again, it didn't if you want, if I owned that I had to be like 17 or 18 when I had that guitar, and and Ozzy and Van Halen and Rat and all those bands, it just didn't sound like I wanted it to sound. It didn't sound anything like those guys, and other than playing it in my room and being really happy with the way it just played when you're sitting on the bed or whatever, it didn't last in as one of those guitars. But I'm sure for any Charvel collector, it's just like it's sort of a must-have.
well, it's a dream guitar, when I found mine, it was accidental, and it had been living 20 minutes from me for years, and a bluegrass guy had it. I don't know why. I mean, I know why now because I spoke to him, but I got it really cheap because I don't know why, but my local dealer was like, "Hey, man, do you wanna buy a Charvel?" And I was deep in vintage stuff at the time, and I'm like, "Nah, man, I'm good." He's like, "It's a red Holdsworth." I'm like, "I'm coming right over," you know? And, so I got with the guy who ordered it brand new from, Brian Guitars in Connecticut back in Rock Scene magazine, they had a column. And so I've got the receipts, I got pictures of the guy playing it, and, I said, "What prompted you to get this thing?" And he's like, "I just loved Allan so much and his tone." He goes, "I got that, and I bought the Pierce rack mount amp and everything," and he goes, "And then I realized I don't sound anything like that." Same here, it's like, "Oh, okay." And now I have 3 Holdsworths, one of them's modded with a Floyd, and then I have another one that's got, like, a skinny neck, and somebody cut this 22nd fret off and rounded it off, like and I'm like, "Okay," but I bought it on eBay, it wasn't expensive at the time, and, I use that a lot for rock stuff because it does sound more rock than the other 2, but yeah, I'm glad to have those particular 3 guitars, and, I mean, we've talked about before, like, the one I've got flooded, I keep tempting myself to just sell it so someone else can enjoy it, you know? So you never know, FedEx might show up with that, I don't know.
Okay. You know, if through the years, it's really what do they call it? Getting high on your own supply. It's really hard not to. And I had to make a decision at some point. Am I a guitar dealer or am I a guitar collector? And there are and do I have a few guitars in the back and at home? Yes, I do. And bizarrely, or not bizarrely, that most they're sentimental guitars more than they are like, oh, I collected this because I'm going to make a ton of money when I decide to sell it. They were important guitars to me. I kept the Charvel is like a childhood guitar that I had. Like it was one of the first real guitars that I had. And I still have that. Uh, I have an 80s Les Paul that I gigged with like back in the days when I had a band and I was doing my thing. And that guitar's sentimental to me because I look at the guitar and I remember all those days and clubs and all that other stuff that came along with it. But it's, and I have a Junior and like there's some old Charvels too, but they're mostly sentimental because I had to make that decision. Because I mean, a perfect example. We were talking about Robert Witt at one point, right? He's in Switzerland and he had amassed this pretty cool collection of Charvel Jacksons. And that stuff is coming in and I'm going like, oh my God, like
I wanna keep it. I wanna keep it.
this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And there's some of the guitars that I sold really, really pained me. The Heineken guitar, I remember as a kid going into Grayson's and Lenny Campanelli owned that guitar and he was a salesman there. And he used to just keep it at work all the time. So he had it in the stand and he would play it when nobody was in the store. So I remember that guitar that was sentimental. We wound up having Vic Verger's guitars and the very first guitar that they made, it was like white and gray and it was the first neck through guitar that they ever made. It
Yeah.
was pre-Randy. It was a V. Chris Blakely got it. And he got it, and bizarrely, this is what's so weird about the psychology of guitar, or guitar buying and collecting is that guitar actually sat on our website for a decent amount of time.
Oh,
Like
yeah, it was a long time.
when that guitar posted, I was like, that's going to sell in 20 hours, like 20 hours, like less than a day. It's just going to go. And it's sad and it's sad. And I think we even reduced the price. Robert called me and he goes, it's one of the stragglers. Let's cut the price by 10% or whatever. And that was the moment where I was like, I really should put this aside. This is pre-Randy. This is pre-Randy Rhoads, first ever V, and I didn't, and Chris has got it, and I'm happy that he has it because he's a cool dude and he's been getting stuff from us. But every once in a while, that happens here.
Vic guitar, I think the real issue with, like, the history of it is really important, but his notoriety is completely under the radar. I only know of him because of the guitar,
Me too.
right?
Yeah, me too.
And so, whereas if it's like, oh, this was Jake E. Lee's whatever, you'd be like,
Right.
I'll take that because I love Jake, right?
Right. Of course.
So,
Yeah.
and from the guitar business, a lot of the marketing is it it can really sell something quick, or it can bite you in the ass because it's like it's sat too long, and I see it with a lot of vintage stuff. It just sits, and nowadays because the consigner has an unrealistic, like, they want dealer money, but they don't have a store and a staff and insurance and all that. And it's like, well, I saw it on the internet, and it's like, you know what? Everybody's got to get a taste, you know. And if you want to sell guitars, you want to get a lot of tasting, not a few big scores, because that runs out. And
So
then, you know,
let's talk about that. Let's shift gears a little bit. Um, in these guitar safaris, obviously you would, on your own and with Joe, you guys have run into some amazing guitars, right? Um, some of the like just quick takeaways that you like. There's so many questions. Have you played a burst that you were just like, this is a dog, and not because it was somebody fucked with it, or just because it really didn't speak at all? Like, have you had that?
I
Um,
can't I can't say a dog, um, but there's several that come to mind that are they just had all this stuff was perfect, and usually they were refretted, so therefore they're already better.
right,
Um, and some of them were planed, so they were flatter, which really speaks to me. Um, and the thing is, you after you handle a couple hundred bursts, you get comfortable, for lack of a better word. So, like every night when we had like 2 or 3 bursts, maybe a guest burst because people would loan them to us. I'd always have a burst on my bus, and so there was one that we got loaned, and I had to carry it around for weeks and weeks, but neither of us we didn't want to borrow it, but we didn't want to be rude to the person. And so this particular guitar was like it was like, oh, I got to bring that back to the bus so it's safe, and it's not safe in the back lounge. We're out there drinking and playing Sabbath on the burst, through the Line 6 Spider on Insane, and um, but overall, like so in '60 when they change everything, the paint, the neck angle gets steeper, the bridge is higher, the tenon shorter. Those guitars sound different. They're tighter. They snap a little bit differently than a 59. And I mean, I can just tell you 5 great bursts. Spot, which Joe used to own, double whites, crazy flame, beat up, big frets, monstrous. Sandy, which was Tom Whitrock's guitar, which now I believe lives in Taiwan. Super flamey, refretted. Again, another rocket ship. And Tom would loan us that guitar, and I'm like, Joe, I'll take that to my bus. And the Skinner burst, I'm not saying this because Joe owns it. I'm saying it's an exceptional rock guitar. It's an everything guitar. Um, Fifth thing is the Black Burst, which near mint, couple of dings, kind of unplayable at this point. But as a guitar, it could be a Pink Burst. It doesn't matter. That guitar it's just on fire. And that's stock frets, stock pickups with covers. And there's more that I like. Some of Vic's bursts, right? Through the years. He's got one called the Gruen burst, and it's faded, and it's got a headstock repair, and he let me borrow it for a couple days, and it's like this thing is and I'm in the hotel room. I'm not plugging in. I'm basing all this on the guitar's
right.
explosive
Did
sitting on a bench.
did you ever play the Ronnie Montrose guitar? Did you ever?
The 58?
Yeah,
Yes. And we used it at a gig before too. That thing was great,
that
you
was
know?
great. So that was one of kind of the sleepers when Gibson did the Collector's Choice run. That guitar was the one that my rock star customers were chasing. So they'd call me and be like, "You have the STP?" And I'd be like, "Yeah." I could drop names. Um, I sent 2 to Warren DeMartini. Like, he wanted one, and I was like, "Dude, I have 2." And I just sent him both guitars, and I was just like, "Play them both and just figure out which one you like the best." I could play them, but, like, everybody's taste is slightly different, so you play them. And then, Brad Whitford wound up falling in love with one of them as well, so, like, that for whatever reason, that guitar had some kind of, at least the way that the custom shop was building them, so it was curious to me if that guitar, the original, because I never played the original, if it had some magic to it, or it just happened to be a thing.
I don't know that it's magic, but what it is you pick it up and you know that you've heard it.
Right. Yeah.
So it's even like if you play Greenie, it's not a I don't want to say it's rough. I mean, it's a rough ride. Greenie's had a hard life, Um, and but it has a certain sound, and it's not gonna have a certain sound through my 5150, right? Which makes everything equally the same. But like through a real, a high powered twin or a Dumble, uh, again, when you have the headroom, you can come and get all those nice little tones. And we used Greenie at Royal Albert Hall, um, and it was super cool at the time. The guy who was brokering it, brought it down. So, and but we didn't. It wasn't like he just dropped it off and left it with us. Like he brought it in to hang out at the hotel. Then he took it with. He restrung it, not me. Or like when we used to go to England, Bernie Marsden would show up and he'd be like, "Oh, hey, I brought you a little present," and he'd give me the Beast, and I'd keep it for like the whole tour, and it was like again, I'm lugging around this guitar, but Bernie was always like, you know, I got a big poster from Guitarist magazine of the Beast, and he wrote on it, "To Mike, safer with you?" question mark, Bernie Mark. And
So
but I mean, that guitar, out of any celebrity guitars, because I don't consider Joe's guitars celebrity guitars. He's just my friend, So it's like, but Bernie's like, legendary stuff. And that guitar I spent a lot of time with. Again, big giant frets, you know, and slightly plain board. And I believe, as I recall, he paid 750 quid for it in, whatever, 1977 or something. Yeah.
yeah, incredible. Just I recently heard Joe come out and say my favorite Les Paul is a 335,
Yeah.
and
A Berklee.
and right, my favorite burst is a 335, and I thought that was so interesting. I guess I owned a '59 335. It was really clean. I had gotten it from Jay Rosen, if you remember,
Sure.
car dealer in California, and I was in tow, or I was being towed around by Perry Margoloff, and we were at a Dallas guitar show, and the guitar was on a stand with Jay, and Perry was like, "Well, if you don't buy it, I'm buying it." And he was like, "But we don't need another 335." And I wound up buying the guitar, and that was the best. That guitar hung out at the Music Zoo for years, and most of the staff played it, and that was one of the best sounding guitars ever. I sold it, of course, because I'm a junkie, and there was something else that I needed, I guess. Um, but that was I get it. I get I get why people like 335 so much.
Yeah, they just like if I put on a 335, all of a sudden it's like I'm playing a Super 400, So, but I have one like a '90s one, and it's a killer. It's a killer guitar. It's flamey. It plays easy. There's
So
I don't have feedback problem or anything.
so we talk about the love for Charvel and Jackson. Do you think that there are, without shooting without shooting any of your friends in the back, any of the new Gibson Fender guitars that are coming out, like master built or Murphy, what have you played that went, "Hmm, this is really awesome." Has that
I
happened to you?
I well, I generally don't go pick something like that up on the wall in a store, uh, and I feel like, you know, I mean, I have a 2013 historic, which is fine. It's flamey, it's whatever, but I've tried to keep it really clean and not modify it. You know, I think Gibson makes great guitars. I think Fender makes great guitars. I'm more inclined, if I was going to get a Fender, I'd probably get a Mexican Fender, um, or like the EVH stuff that's made in Mexico
Right,
is great. Um, and the you must know my friend Matt at Gibson. You know, he knows a lot about vintage stuff. He's an expert on all kinds of things and a swell guy. And he's trying to make sure they make the best possible version. I mean, I think they make fine guitars. For some reason, they never feel like a 59 or a 54 Strat, right? But then, mind you, they haven't been beaten to death for years. But
Right.
even if I go find a maple neck 50 Strat that's unplayed, as soon as I touch it, I know, oh yeah, this is it. This is the one. And like a 54 Strat neck versus a 55 Strat neck versus 56. Like 55, 56 is like the magic period. And then 57, 58, they start getting kind of more rounded. And then 59 shows up and everything changes. The whole profile's different. And, they're getting rosewood and stuff. But like, I just had a guy up shopping for maple neck strats, and he's looking for this like late 55, early 56 profile. It's slightly V'd, right? Not prominent V like in 57. Um, and this is everybody doesn't have the opportunities that I've been lucky enough to have to touch so many and have them all together. Like I've been able to sit there and have 4 flying V's on the table, you know, and I've been able to take the 4 flying V's apart at the same time and document. I would tour with Joe and we would have Amos, we would have a borrowed V. We had an Explorer out there before, Big Ed, the famous Explorer. And with Big Ed was his brother's V, which was he was lefty, so I had a double guard. And you know, to be able to touch that stuff, and then I'm also a collector of information. So, and I'm very focused. I know a lot of stuff about Fenders and whatever, but I'm interested in bursts. I'm interested in Carina, and I'm interested in Charvels. So, uh, and with Carina, there's specific things that the replica makers don't know. And I mean, I can literally look inside at the routing, and it doesn't matter if you know this thing inside, you don't have the machine to reproduce it or the jig. And if these features are not in the guitar, even if everything else is the right pots, the right pickups, the patina, blah, blah, blah. We all know Max made replicas, and he wasn't doing that to fake you out. He was just, you couldn't buy a V. So, Robin Crosby wants a Carina V. Well, I'll build him one, that's all. And of course, there's lascivious people out there who want to, pull one over on you. But I think all this stuff of fake this, fake that, like you, there's far less of it than we think, or than the rumors say. It's like the guys who say, "Oh, they made 1,500 bursts, but there's 2,500 of them now." You know, those are people who've never touched. They've never touched one. And they're just typing shit to start shit. And but I'm interested in minutia. And I've probably disassembled around 21 Vs, which is an exorbitant amount. Um, and when people tell you, well, there's 81 Vs and 19 Explorers, it's completely wrong because it's a factory. It's made in batches. There's well over 100 Vs.
Say that
There's,
say that again. You broke up for a second. How many?
so so when people are talking about the totals of the Carina, they always quote these numbers, which are shipping totals. But this is a factory that makes batches of guitars. So they're not going to go, well, we're only going to make 19 of these. Who the hell's, no, we're going to make 30 or whatever, and I've been tracking all this stuff for 20 something years. And cause the Gibson ledger is missing and all this. And so I have my own ledger starting in 58, going to 60. And I've been tracking not only the guitars I love, I'm tracking all of them, because then when this burst shows up with this weird serial number that's a melody maker, I can be, well, we need to look at that twice. And I'm not saying there's not double stamping going on back then, but it's it's not common, and it's I've seen a few things pop up recently that I'm like, "Well, that's legit and that's legit," but I've been piecing it together. The problem is I can never finish it because I discover a new guitar and wanna add to the list and stuff, and like, my Karina list is there's well over 100, Vs, and I think I'd have to look it up, but I think I wanna say I have somewhere around 50 something Explorers on it, which, you know, just, it's I'm just interested in these weird numbers and stuff, and eventually I'll print it up and sell it to, you know.
Is it fair to say because, you know, part I mean, you're well known on your own, but also because of Joe, you guys are just seeing these guitars constantly? Is that why you're running
Well
into so many?
well, with Joe, what we started doing, because he's already a magnet for this shit, so we started doing this thing the first year I worked for him. We were like, show up with a lift-in case and we'll play your guitar. You can hang out, you can try all the shit. So people started bringing their bursts and letting him play it, or just letting us see it, um, and then for a few years, it was like we were attracting these people, and then I'd be able to document everything and make notes, or sometimes, like I'd take my pictures all on the iPhone, nothing pro, but right when I'm about to take the picture, the lighting guy decides to go to green, or something, and ruin my shot. Or some guys didn't want us to take them apart, which is fine. Uh, I only wanted to take them apart to document it, not to say your guitar's fucked up, shit like that. And and we only had a couple of like I can think of two bursts that weren't bursts, and I can think of one V that wasn't made in Kalamazoo. Like I like to say, I was at a, a well known guitarist's house, and he had some Karina there, and he pulled one out, and I said, "Well, who made this?" He goes, "Well, I don't know. You're the expert. You tell me." And I was like, "Well, I can tell you where it has never been unless you drove there. It was never in Kalamazoo." you know. So, but
I'm sure that doesn't go over well, whether they show it, you know, outwardly or inside. They're just like, "Oh my god," you know,
yeah,
no matter who
and
you are and what level you're at, you know, like, chances are that
well, I
you've
also
spent
don't want to rain
more
on
money
your
than
parade. It's simple thing. Simple thing is, if you're gonna play in those leagues in that thin air, right? You're up on friggin' Mount Everest. You're gonna bring a friend, hopefully
yeah.
a knowledgeable one. Just because you're wealthy doesn't make you wise, right? And it's easy to buy these guitars if you have money. But what if I was saving my whole life for a burst? Well, what I would have done is call Uncle Lou and say, "Hey, man, can you come over to the pizza joint? I got a burst here," you know, and always put.
So that's yeah, that's something that's worth just for a minute talking about is, you know, especially now with the prices that people are paying, it's you really have to do your homework and find reputable people. That's not the audience that you want to find a guitar on Facebook Marketplace and meet somebody at the local Planet Fitness or Stop and Shop in the parking lot. That's not advisable. Oh, I'm getting a great deal. I'm going to do this. You know, like I don't need Mike Hickey, or I don't need somebody to kind of just sort of bless this and make sure, yeah, it is what it is, you know.
Well, no,
And I've seen, yeah, and
there, there, there was, in the past, there's been a couple of has been a couple of people, a few people who, they're selling you this service that, you know, I just want a little courtesy if I help you, right? But these guys were like, they're more like selling. They're like, I'm the burst guy, and it's like, well, I'm still learning shit every day,
it's
and
what's great is that I can read your mind and I know who you're thinking about as you're talking through little circles, and I won't say anything, but
sure.
yeah,
And
I
those
mean,
people, they can
it's
do what they want.
you spend I mean, for me, like I spent my entire life being reputable, like it's hard work, like to just you just like consistently look at stuff and make sure you have the right thing. And if you don't, I've passed on things just because I just didn't feel right. There's a book. Is it Malcolm Gladwell? Forget the name of the book. I'm sure if once we post this, the internet will tell us what the name of the book is. Blink is called. When you look at a guitar from 50 feet away, you can just know. You're just like, oh yeah, that's not right.
Yeah,
And I've
Joe and I,
there's been times where I just like, why am I getting a funny feeling about this? And I just go with, I wish I could do it with the rest of my life, but when I get a funny feeling about the guitars, I just pass. It's like, I don't know why I'm not into it, but I'm just not
well, a real
gonna look.
guitar reveals itself. Um,
Yeah.
a real guitar reveals itself, right? As soon as you open the case, it reveals itself to a trained eye, a knowledgeable person with
And
experience.
nose.
And yeah, you can smell it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's part of it.
And
Yeah.
um, but it's I don't know.
If,
I've helped a
if
bunch
you
of people.
had, if you had endless money, which if you don't already, I hope at one point you have. I don't. But if you had endless money and there's a guitar that you could buy like tomorrow, if you had endless money,
Mhm.
what would be the guitar that you just like always yearn for that you're like, oh man, that thing. I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about it.
Well, it's not a specific guitar, but what it would be is I would go and I would buy multiple bursts, right? Um, like I've always said, these guys are all lucky I don't have that kind of money because all this stuff they're buying, I'd have already gotten it. You know, I would have been, you know, Joe and I would be sitting around and there'd be like 25 or 30 of them in the room just because you can. I mean, that's completely wasteful. And, um, when you could sell one burst and, buy someone a house or get people off the streets and feed them. And, you forget sometimes when you're comfortable that everybody's suffering around you on their way up, or down. And so, the vanity of having these giant collections, whether it be guitars, watches, paintings, vintage books, stamp collecting, you know, is you're focusing all your money in where it could do better things with your life and your family's life and stuff. But, from the struggle of building yourself up to a certain point where you can pay your rent and not worry about it at night. That takes a long time. It takes a long time to buy all these amps. It takes a long time to collect 50 guitars. And, I'm trying to get rid of stuff now. Like I said, I want two of these, two of these, two of these, and, um, and 412s I want to get rid of as fast as possible.
Yeah, the amp market has changed quite a bit. Nobody wants to lug anything around, And we talked about the vintage amp market too. I think it's it's at a moment like and without drop his name, Joe was here last week and we talked about vintage amps, and he'll have no problem selling them because he's Joe Bonamassa, and like it's, hey, Joe Bonamassa owned this, and it's got a value to it because his DNA is or he's played through it or whatever. But the vintage, there's less and less people that want those amps now.
Yeah.
And it
And
was a point where you'd see a Plexi and people, like the two of us would be, like fist fighting over it, and that's neither one of us want to deal with the headaches that come along with it and carry it around. And where the hell could you play that thing now? Like you just can't even play that loud, you
yeah,
know?
and
So
every
it's,
tube amp needs a repair. Everything needs servicing.
yeah.
And
And find the guy that does that now. Cause all those guys that really knew what they were doing are now in their 70s or 80s, and the young guys could probably, put a scope up to it and try to fix some stuff. And obviously there's Dave Friedman's around too. So like, there's a few people, but it's a smaller group than it used to be.
yeah, and I mean, and then, you know, you know, the then you like I've got a guy locally, just a regular guy. He will only do tube amps, no circuit boards, Then I got a guy in Massachusetts who does high gain shit, and then of course, I love Friedman amps. Uh, and then of course Tracy Guns makes amps, and he can fix your amp. you know, and
If you had so let's change since we're talking about amps. If there's one, the Desert Island amp, you might have it behind you, but like, what's the amp that you just love playing through, or that you've played through? Um, Dumble is the 5150.
I've owned that since 1993.
So and that's the PV, right? So yeah, and that's funny that like so I'm very close with Matt Bruck, and we've talked about this. And James Brown was the guy that designed that thing too, and he's obviously done all the EVH stuff. But there's something about the old PVs, and they're like $1,200 on Reverb. Like they're not a ton of money, and they sound so good. They sound so good.
And saying that, I just took a bunch of amps and cabs in the studio, and we did the 5150 tracks. We did wet, dry, wet with the harmonizer. And I was like, I'm just not getting something. So we took this Metro Friedman, put it on 10 through a 412, and we took this modded Marshall over here, and which is a sewer modded 50 watt. And we turned that on 10 and we split it with a Klon in front of it. And it was fantastic. It was, so I ended up not using the 5150, but there's more riffs to record. So I don't,
Yeah.
that's the thing. We're not short on riffs. We're short on time,
Dumbles. Um, Most people have not played through a Dumble, and your take. I've heard them. I've played through them. Like what you're, and I know everyone's different. So like, if you had to just generalize, did you have a did you have a spiritual moment with a Dumble, or were you like, eh?
uh, it's not that the thing is, a Dumble's really revealing about your technique, and it needs to be uh, operated by the right person. And my full Dumble experience is strictly with Joe, and my favorite Dumble, which he probably still has, is a 50 watt 112. And of course, his setting is not what I would set it at, but you just got to remember too, every time he's playing through that, there's still a Jubilee involved, right? And so it's the Jubilee and the Jubilee, or it's the Jubilee and the Twins, or it's the Jubilee and the Dumbles. And then I think he's got an additional Dumble now that he can kick in again. And I saw him a few months ago and took my girlfriend on stage during sound check. And I said, dude, let it rip for her, right? And she'd never been like in front of this stuff. She's been here, but I don't play that loud in the room. But she's like, holy shit, that's like the most awesome tone sound ever. And also, her hair's blowing back like the Matt Bell thing. And but the Dumble's special, but every single one's different. It's not, and it is still in your hand, because I'll play through Joe's rig and it sounds nothing like Joe. You know,
That's the Ted Nugent, Eddie Van Halen thing, right? Remember, like there's Ted talking about let me plug into that thing, and he just plugs into the plywood pedal board with the phase shifter and everything. That's nothing like Edward, of course.
yeah, it's the simplest thing, and you can feel. There's certain things you can feel when you kick in the Dumble on top of the Marshall. Like I used to like to use a JCM 900 and a 5150 and take the mids out of the Marshall and then leave the mids thick on the 5150. Whereas most death metal bands are getting rid of mids. And I was like, I want those mids. I love that sound. And, but for me, a, a good high gain Marshall, a Friedman, uh, or the 5150. Those amps I could get around on, but you want to cripple me, make me sit in with your band with a deluxe reverb. I mean, I, I just, it, it's just not the way I play.
Yeah, yeah,
So especially at my age, like when I'm playing now, I want to play just what I play. I'm not trying to become something. I'm not trying to sound like anything. I want Van Halen's tone, but I don't want to learn how to play Eruption. I still can barely. I know a couple little pieces, but I can't play all that. I don't learn note for note anything. You know.
Have you had recently, within, let's call it the last 5 years, any guitar players come out that you go, hmm, that guy's awesome. Like,
Jeez. I mean,
or people that you gravitate to, that you tend to listen to over and over again.
yeah. I mean, as far as modern music, I don't really listen to it.
Okay.
And not because these people aren't great at what their craft and stuff, but I'm more, I listen to the same albums I listened to growing up.
That's me. Yeah.
And I feel like it's like if I have time to listen to a band, I want it to be something that really makes me happy. And I mean, I love many genres. I love many styles of lead guitar, you know.
Give me your top 5 guys from childhood to now. Like, if you had to, I can recite mine. Who are your top 5 guys?
I mean, Ed, Beck, Allan, Randy, and then there's a few on the 5th spot because they're just all too good. I mean, McLaughlin, you know, Lukather, Neil Sean,
Yeah,
uh, y- you know, uh, all those guys that really sound like them.
correct.
And
Yeah.
I love Greg Koch. I love Andy Wood. I like Ben Eller, right? You know what I mean? Like I love all these guys. I like Tomo, right? With his funky ass shit, right? He's badass. And um, I mean, I just went to see Greg and Paul Gilbert, and I sat at the sound check, and Gilbert was just destroying the guitar, right? Right. And I was just sitting right beside him, like, and Doug Rappaport was playing second guitar, and he's destroying the guitar. And then Greg, you know, he's like this monolith of riffage. and, uh, and, they were all a treat to hear. And I mean, of course, and I love I love Clapton. I love Led Zeppelin, David Gilmour, like, you know, it's just like this. There's
Are
so
you a are you a Clapton or a Leslie West guy? If you had to choose between the two of them.
I'm I'd lean song wise to Clapton, tone and lead wise to Leslie West, right?
Yeah.
And I met Leslie once, and he was absolutely hilarious. He was in the wheelchair,
Oh, later on, yeah.
and so he's at Joe's gig, and he's in front of my workbench with the wheelchair. He's like, "Hey man, come over here, man." And I said, "Hey, what's up?" He goes, "What's that pedal he keeps stepping on?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's just a tube screamer, man." He's like, I used to have one of them. He goes, I can't step on it no more. I was,
Oh, shit.
yeah,
Well,
yeah. I mean, he was
I
something.
I met him. I used to go see Leslie anytime I could, right? And because he was in that area, in the New York area, he played often, in the 80s and the late 80s and early 90s. So I saw him several times, and I fanboyed him pretty much every time I saw him. So I saw him at Lemoore East. I think he played Lemoore Brooklyn. I think I was there for that. He played somewhere at like BB King's or one of those places in the city. Every time he was kind of local, somehow there would be a crew of guitar players, and we'd all go see him. And he'd either be at the bar beforehand or after, so you could actually approach him. Um, and I remember so many things, like even when he was playing the Steinberg, that phase,
Yes.
he still sounded like Leslie. It still sounded huge and Junior-esque. So it wasn't like, oh, it's just a Les Paul Jr. and a P90. It's just, no, it's Leslie. Whether it's, 1970 or it's like 1992, he still sounded like Leslie and still played those great riffs. I loved his voice. And so I fanboyed him, and I just went up like, Leslie, I love you, and blah, blah, blah. And I asked him who his favorite guitar players were, and his favorite two were Beck, maybe obvious, and the second one was Pete Townsend, and he kept talking about Pete because he loved Pete's rhythm work and he just loved the songwriting. And then what I didn't know, and Jared James Nichols was here. It's already almost 10 months, a year ago. And he told me that Leslie actually recorded Who's Next. All the guitar parts were Leslie, and they wound up not using it, but for whatever reason, Pete wanted Leslie to play. So the whole, and you could find this on Apple Music or Spotify, and he's on the whole record, Bargain and all those songs. And there's like Leslie playing those songs. It's insane. It's insane. I'll text it to you if I find it on Spotify. It's insane. But um, but Leslie. I felt that way. Like, and then when it happened, so I started playing the guitar in 1978, and what was out at that time, Clapton wise, it was like Cocaine and Lay Down Sally and stuff. So when I was, like I have an older sister, and she was kind of like bringing some musical influence into the house, and her friends would be like Clapton, and I'd hear that, and then I heard, I was like, hands down, I'm gravitating to Leslie, um, but I mean, there's obviously Clapton moments. The first time you hear, like Shiny 11, you hear, it's just like, oh my God, listen to that, And by today's standards, obviously it's not as big of a thing. But when you heard that on FM radio, when you cranked it up, the guitar sounded pretty unreal,
Yeah, not
Um,
like anything else.
no, so yeah, it had its own thing going. So I get both camps, but I always wind up seem to listening to Leslie more. And if Leslie comes on the radio, I get excited. Where like Clapton, I'll just be like, oh, I'll change the channel, or I don't get as excited by it for whatever it's worth.
Yeah,
Um,
I got more interested in, of course, I loved Cream and I loved the Blues Breakers record, but uh, like 9 or 10 years ago, Joe did the British blues stuff, and he was doing some Clapton, and he needed second guitar. So he's like, "Hey man, could you learn these songs and play rhythm on a few songs?" I'm like, "I could do whatever you want. Let's do it." So like we were doing like Pretending by Clapton, and so I like learned that, and of course we played Beck's Bolero, which I already knew from being a kid, but and we did Motherless Children. Um, and something else by Clapton, but it was something I'd never explored. And like, I learned so much from it. And then Joe changed the set list and I was out of the band. So that's, that's how it works.
it's hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah. But I did learn a lot about Clapton and his more, chorusy period. And,
Did,
yeah.
did you have just funny anecdotal kind of stuff? Have you had moments teching, whether it's for Joe or somebody else, where like 5 minutes before the show, something really screwed up happens, whether an amp's not working or a guitar just like spontaneously combusts, like that you have to fix on the spot, that you remember, that you just like, oh my God, I'll remember that when I'm dead. I'm going to wake up shivering about that 3 minutes that I had to rescue some situation.
Well, with Joe, okay, so Joe's special in that he's very level headed about any problems. And we're already prepared, pair and a spare, right? So um, my guitar tech mishaps are in the gig. So a great one is Joe has a song in open D minor, right? Uh, called Mountain Climbing. So we're going to do a different song, but I've got the Firebird, which is the D minor guitar in my brain. But we're doing an open G song. So I tune it to open D minor. I don't think another thing about it. And on my list, it says Firebird next to the song. So I just hand him the Firebird and he goes clang. And I went, are you? And we both are like, oh. And this is only a nanosecond because I do have a spare in G. And so that was like a real boner, as my dad used to say. And then one time with John Oates at the Hammersmith Odeon, one time with John Oates, I hang his Telecaster on the hanging stand, like this, and the telly headstock is missing all this, so it goes dunk, and it and he this is tuned to drop D. Now it's tuned to drop D and a half or something, but we're filming for MTV, so I can't go out there, and there is no backup in drop D because he only had a couple guitars, and he gave me the look, and he wasn't particularly mad after the show, but of course I'm over there just mortified. And then probably my greatest failure is last year with Slash. He he usually tunes to D flat, E flat, right? But on Chinese Democracy, it's standard drop D. So I'm stretching tunings. It's a lot of guitars. We're outside. The tuning's fluctuating. So I start stretching the strings on the Chinese Democracy guitar, BC Rich Bitch, and I see C sharp on the D string. Woo, right? So my brain goes C sharp. Yeah, okay, great. Should be C sharp. Well, the rest of the guitar's in drop D standard. So I walk out and I go, here's your guitar. See you later. And he goes up, "Wah," and there's that rotten note right in the middle of everything. And he's got the mirrored sunglasses, and I see the laser beams. I did have a spare. We rectified it quickly. So a couple days later, I'm having dinner with Fortis. I'm like, yeah, things are getting a little better over in stage wrong. You know, uh, the tuning's getting a little better as well. I feel more confident. He goes, how do you feel about Chinese Democracy? And I was like, oh, you're back, you know,
And
and
he's not that guy. We had him here. If pre-COVID, he did a guitar clinic here. And he's not that guy. So, but I mean, he's a funny guy. But that's
no,
funny that
he was just hassling me, because he's
yeah.
a lovely guy, a great player,
And
and
what a great guitar player. Holy shit. Yeah.
yeah, he can
It-
play all styles. You
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
yeah,
Really well. Really well. I
yeah.
mean, little things that you just notice about people, like, and great guy. We had a clinic here with him for oh my god, he has his own model with this company. We're currently not selling them. It'll come to me in a second. And him and the rep were here before anybody got here. They were here. They had their coffees ready to go, and it was like a Saturday at like maybe 9 o'clock in the morning. And the two of them are here at like 9 sharp. I pull up and hang out with them, and he couldn't have been nicer and more diplomatic and just on point with everything he did, and just a great guitar player. And there was a lot of stuff I just didn't know about him. I didn't know that he was in Thin Lizzy for a little bit and just did some of these gigs. And then I started like asking information. He was the first guy. It's now it's public information, but he was the guy that told me that John Sykes had auditioned at some point for GNR.
Wow, I didn't
Yeah,
know
and I'm a huge John Sykes fan, and I heard that and I was just like, tell me the whole thing. Don't leave anything out.
that.
Everything. And from what he had told me, he's I don't know if it was, like he was there and I don't know if they had found somebody already and he was there for the audition or how it was unfolding. Um, but, but Richard went to Axel and was like, this is John Sykes. You have to let him audition. He's here. Let him go through the process. Don't just kind of be like, thanks, we're good. And I think that they did. And I mean, could you imagine Guns N' Roses with John Sykes playing? Like, holy shit. And obviously Slash at that minute in time wasn't around. Um, but just nothing but cool stories. And just, like I appreciate it. And we talked, he was working at a recording studio in downtown Manhattan, and I think was living in Little Italy at the time. And we were talking about Little Italy, and like he was like, "What Little Italy?" And I was like, "I know, it's all gone. Like it used to be like several blocks. Now it's like 2 or 3 restaurants, and everything's gone." But we had some nice conversations. I was happy to have him here.
Yeah, speaking of Sykes, GNR actually play Thunder and Lightning live.
No shit.
Yeah,
I,
and so usually on the set list it just says Duff because he sings it. So it's a different song every show. that he chooses. And so they kick into it at a sound check one day. And I'm like, oh shit, you know, and and it's it's interesting to hear because Richard's probably more Sykes-ish than Slash is. So it's interesting to hear Slash's take because Slash he can get rolling really like he's
Oh,
got a
yeah.
lot like there's a song called Double Talk and Jive where he does like this extended solo and he
Right.
really gets firing on that one, and he's a really consistent player in terms like there's not a lot of clamory going on with him. He's Slash. He plays like Slash.
Who plays like Slash. I got a chance to very friendly with Adam Day, who's been his longtime tech on and
Yeah.
off.
First guy
And
that's the first guy I called when I got the phone call.
yeah,
Help.
and they played the they what do you call it? Not obviously not GNR. They played at the Paramount here, the Slash and the Conspirators.
Mhm.
And I went down to see Adam and hang out and watched a few songs from just like the sound check, and just being in the room by myself. It's just the Paramount here in Huntington is maybe it's like a 2,000 seater, 1,800 something like that, and I was just standing in front of the stage like I was the only person in the security guard and like Slash's girlfriend or whatever, just and and at that moment I got it. I saw them at the Ritz in 1986 before, I think it was before or right when Appetite was released. Um, and being impressed by his playing, but I was up in the rafters somewhere for that gig, but like right in front of him. His tone is really wonderful. And he's one of the few guys that can make a guitar sing. He's got that musical, um, like it's a bad comparison, but Brian May, where like Brian May, you could sing the notes, you could hum along with the solos, and Slash, there was several things that he was doing in a couple of songs that were just very melodious. It wasn't just a shred, which I found, it was fun, and
He
we've
also he has his rig is simple. It's basically a half stack.
yeah
It's a handful of pedals that any of us can buy. There's no secret pedal there. There's a Boss delay. There's an octaver or whatever. Um, some boosts, simple boosts for here and there. So most of him is here.
yeah
It's all here. And I
yeah
mean, he's he destroys the instrument. Like, I was changing his high E string in the middle of the show so that when November Rain came and he hits that big super high note that it didn't snap. And I mean, it's it's something to witness in motion for sure, not from the other side. And uh, and it's a whole different. The Bonamassa thing is like this. Everything's already planned. We know what's going to happen. 8 o'clock, the guy with the suit shows up. We go down the list, and then with GNR, uh, it's a variable set list, and it's huge. It's 3 hour show, and Axel will call the songs as he sees fit. He'll follow kind of a pattern, but you kind of need to be ready for anything, which is completely terrifying. And um, you know, and sometimes he won't call it till after the song ends, and then you've got Slash going, "What are we doing?" I don't know. Ask your friend. you know, uh, and as because I just went to fill in with Slash. I was just brought in because his guy had some family things to take, personal things to take care of. So it was like a couple days notice, as we've talked about, and um, you know, I I I learned so much about stadium rock versus theater rock versus club tours. And I never used wirelesses, so I had to deal with all the wireless stuff. And we have a second, we would have a second tech running the effects, Ace Bergman, the great guitar tech and great guitar player too. And, um, it was only meant to be a part-time job, but Slash was courteous and kind, and he wants what he wants, but he's very direct. He's not He was never obnoxious or anything, and I stay in touch with him. He's a lovely guy, and I don't want the gig. It's too much work. I'm supposed to be on my phone looking at guitars on Reverb, you know?
Yeah.
And then,
There yeah.
you know, and then I get home from that and I'm like, okay, good. I can get back to hustling guitars and staying home. And then Tracy Guns calls, and it's another kind of emergency situation. Can you be here in the next day or two? And because I love Tracy, I was like, all right, you know. And his gig is the complete opposite. He's got 4 or 5 guitars. He might just use one. He might use two. He's like, yeah, man, whatever. The only thing he can do to ruin your day as a guitarist is he can build an amp and go, let's put this in the rig. But he's just got some pedals, a few Marshall based products, a few cabs, and he just rocks out. And, you know, uh, just one of the greats as well. Great to work with. Uh, and, you know, all these cats have taught me so much about how to be a better tech or a better player.
Where do you, shifting gears a little bit, where do you think the vintage market is in 20 years, if you had to speculate?
Well, I'll be dead, so that's the key factor in that.
You
So,
won't be dead. You're not that old.
I think because right now there's a lot going on, and I don't mean what you see in, you know, Carter's videos or whatever, right? Or, you know, whoever. Um, a lot of these things are selling privately, like always, the big boy stuff. And the prices are getting crazy because the people who want this are like wealthy, 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 you know? They're not just I got enough money to buy, you know, 20 vintage guitars. They have money to make you sell the guitar that you don't want to sell. And so and of course I talk to people privately who, you know, tell me stuff which then I never, you know, I don't mention it again um because they'll never tell me, you know. So I think it's gonna always the blue chip stuff is always gonna it's like any commodity. It's gonna stay fairly level. It's gonna jump. It's gonna dip, but it's gonna tread the line. A good clean burst is a good clean burst. A real flying V is a real flying V. A you know a bumblebee original Charvel is always going to command a certain price precedent. Now you've seen through the past couple years with moving Rob stuff, some of those guitars were like boom, right? And people fighting over it. And, you know, or a couple guitars you sold for me. Those were easy to move along because they had certain pedigree and then they had certain desirability. But then you see now everything's tapered in Charvel world. It's kind of even right now. Um, an incredible version of something that's unplayed, which most of them are all beat up, screwed up, modified, and so those aren't going to go up that much. And you know, then we have this whole. There's a bunch of people with some money, but they can't pay the big boy money. You know, so a refin Charvel, maybe by GMW
Right.
would be okay. And you can instead of paying, let's say I've got a perfect Bumblebee and it's 20,000. Well, what if it's a GMW refin and it's only 7,500, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So but that still takes money. It takes a lot of money to buy the cool stuff, even if it's, you know, modded a
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. I agree with you. The Charvel Jackson thing, we may have a slightly different take on because you got to, you know, you look at it from like an age group perspective, right? The people that dig those guitars are at the moment, as we're doing this, let's call it 45 years old to 65 or so, give or take, maybe a little bit higher, a little bit lower, right? And there's still a span of that because you're seeing all these arena tours are still happening, and all of the legacy acts are coming around, and they'll probably, as long as they could keep doing it. I mean, look at the Stones; they're in their 80s, they're still doing it. So I still feel that there could be some growth there because of just the age group and what people are into and what people are listening to. Now the guys like you and I like are at a point in our life maybe where if we did really sweat that Charvel and had to have it, we'd figure it out. And that probably goes on for another several years. The thing I worry about is so the archtop market, right? So the D'Angelicos and guitars like that, the people
No,
that the people that sweat those guitars are are older. I'll be nice to say they're older, and they're not thinking about like, oh, I'm going to spend 50 grand on this Angelico. They're going, it's 50 grand. My wife and I want a new kitchen, or we're going to move to Florida, or we're going to take that vacation that we always wanted before they collect that guitar. And so I fear that like as the next age group comes, like the desire for a Fender Tweed amp or something like that starts to wane, you know. But I think
yes,
you're right. Like a burst is always going to be a burst and a V, and there'll always be those people. And the sad thing for both you and I is that the people that are collecting $100 million pieces of art isn't something that we could even conceive in our brain. But it's very possible that these guitars enter into that at some point of the equation.
yeah. I mean, the burst is going to keep going. Karina is going to keep going, but that's partially supply and demand as well because there's not enough of them. But think about it: if there's 1,500 bursts, right? Um, so that means there can be 1,500 people that own them, but generally there's probably less than 200 people that own them, and a lot of the trading goes amongst the inner circle, and um, and they it's like baseball cards. Oh, I've got this Yankees card. I'll trade it for this one, and it's like
Yeah.
it.
So it's like so what you're saying at some point when you decide to sell me one of your Hamers, like nobody will ever know about it. It's just me and you
Yeah, it's
because
just
it's
me
gonna
and you, and
be in the circle.
until you come
Yeah.
over and you're like, hey, dude, can I try that other Hamer? And it's like, well, it's gone, you know, and it's that kind of thing. And, of course, here's a good example. We publicly sold the Black Demon, and uh, I, I sent it to you because I didn't want to field the phone calls, you know, and it's worth every penny to me to give it to your team to leave me out of that equation, you know, and um, the but a lot of this stuff, and I mean, there's been in the past couple months, there's been a bunch of old big guitars moving around the circuit, and it's good that there's people out there with that money that can do that, but there's this perceived value of less than instruments, which is why those instruments sit and other ones go quickly. Look at our friend Trevor at Emerald City. He'll buy or consign whatever he does, but he'll get a burst and it's gone. He'll get an old Martin. It's gone because he's getting the good stuff. He's honest. It's like your store. A lot of There's a different uh, financial factor, but a lot of your custom ordered stuff, your custom shop stuff, like Jordan will post it and then it's like, he's like, this is going to be going fast. And then it's gone.
Yeah.
You know, there's a
Yeah.
market in each level for
Absolutely.
each
Yeah.
niche.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think we've done a good job of figuring out at least our market and what it is and what people like and you know and the ideas for custom guitars here are sort of endless. So at least we have that platform that we do pretty good with.
Yeah. And you do interesting features and combinations and, um, you know, the the guitar never goes away, which is amazing, you know? I mean, my girlfriend is learning guitar, and her daughter strums the guitar. Her teenage son just got his first guitar, you know, and, I know all kinds of young people. I know old people. Over the years, I've taught, you know, 6, 7, 8 year olds, teenagers, 30 somethings, 50 somethings that wanted to learn Wonderful Tonight, you know, little kid who wants to learn Enter Sandman, and it's always there. And I don't think it's going away. I definitely don't think AI is going to take over music. Um, Anyone who plays music doesn't need AI for any to help with anything. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's it's a visceral thing. You want to touch it and choke it, and you know, and
Yeah.
you want to feel the gunstock oil. And uh, it the market thing though is like everyone speculates. I'd rather have guitars than a savings account because I can call someone to buy the guitar and when I need the money, whereas I can sit with the guitar and enjoy it. It can be a work of art. It can be an instrument. It can be a tool. It can be a financial thing. But
So
if I just have a bank account, I just have money.
that's one thing that I've always appreciated about the guitar, and I appreciated about the people that, and it's not only the guitars. I'm not one of them, but there's people that obviously have a couple of cool automobiles, like vintage cars or whatever, and they have guitars, and they're able to enjoy them, and still it's part of the collection. It still appreciates.
Yes.
And just like you said, yeah, you could have a big bank account, but it's just sitting there. You're not, other than looking at it and uh, they, what is it called? Like, it's like an assumed wealth thing, or, like if you look, if you have a stock and your stock goes up, it makes you feel, like a certain way, but like, like you have accumulated a little bit more wealth or more comfortable or whatever, but you're not enjoying it. You're not playing it. You're not, so there's so much more to the whole collecting thing. It's fun. If you had, last question, because we're 2.5 hours in. No, no, they do, and I think like you of all people, you've been around all these guitars, and not everybody has that ability to be around all these bursts and to take them apart and to sniff them and play them and see what they do and how they react at low volume and high volume, which is a completely different thing than just sitting on your bed in your room. Um, so you have a take on this that most do not have. And that's why people, I know the people that you're friends with will reach out to you about certain things. That's why they do.
Yeah.
You have a great
Plus,
value
plus
in this whole.
I don't I don't have a agenda other than facts. I operate with facts. So there's no
Yeah.
fanfare.
Yeah, you're not selling the
I'm
guitar,
not
so you have you,
I'm not selling you a car.
right. So that perspective is very valuable. So I can't help but feel that people will listen to this and be excited about the stuff that you have to say. Um, you'll be surprised, and all of the collectors that want to know something, or, like it's, again, you and I have spent hours on the phone, and we could do this again. I think there's more stuff to talk about, but, uh, like you have a great value in the guitar world, my friend.
Thank you. Well, so do you, and a lot of our mutual friends and peers, what we're like this because of all of us, and with the collecting guitars value wise, Joe and I have always said, you got to be ready for this thing to be worth $1 tomorrow. Not,
Absolutely.
you know, you have to love and here I'm surrounded by all that stuff. And my favorite guitar in the whole world was $535 on eBay
Yep.
20 years ago,
Yep. Yeah.
and, and it did have stripes at the time, but I painted it, you know,
It's awesome. It's awesome. So like I said, we could keep going, and maybe we'll do a second one of these, but at the 2 hour mark, we're probably good.
yeah,
Um,
do
I
some
appreciate
editing.
you hanging. Now I want to call Sherinian now that we talked about him. Hopefully his ears are ringing.
Surely.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, we'll catch up more on the phone, I'm sure, later in the week.
Okay, great.
All right. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my
Thanks.
pleasure.
Thanks for
Super fun.
spending time. Yeah, and we'll talk more. There's more stuff to do.
Okay. See you guys
All right.
later. Thanks,
Take it
Jordan.
easy.
Bye.
Welcome. Thank you. Bye.